Thank you. Thank you very much. This comes from a short story, thank you, by Maupassant, published in 1895, called The Piece of String. Now, the story begins on market day. Now, market day is the busiest day of the week. It's the day when all the farmers come from the surrounding districts into town, the town being Goderville, and they set up their booths and their stalls and bring in their poultry and their produce and their livestock. And on this particular market day, coming into town is a gentleman, and he's lives out in one of the further districts, and he's walking into town, and he sees on the road in the dirt a piece of string. Now, this gentleman's name is John Holcomb, and John Holcomb is the kind of man that knows the value of everything, and he believes, it's his personal philosophy, that sooner or later everything will be of value. So he bends down and he picks up the piece of string, and as he is doing so, he feels a pair of eyes watching him. So he turns and he looks, and sure enough, standing in the doorstep is Jordan the harness maker. Now, I should tell you at this point that Jordan the harness maker and John Holcomb had a very bitter argument just about a year ago about money and services rendered or not rendered, depending on who you believe, and they had been enemies ever since. And so as Holcomb was standing there with a piece of string in his finger and being watched by his enemy, he had a sense of shame and embarrassment that he should be so concerned with something so insignificant as a piece of string. And so in a gesture of of guilt, he put the string in his shirt sleeve, and then began to look around in the dirt to pretend to see if he could find something else. And then after a little while, he straightened up and he just continued walking into town and into the market. Well, the market ends about 12 noon, and at that time, the farmers who live close by, they return to their homes, and the farmers that live out further, they stay and have their midday meal at the local tavern, which is right next to the market square. And these luncheons are very loud affairs. There's big spits of meat that are cooked in the open fires, and lots of drinking, and people are talking. They're talking about the things they bought, the things they sold, and what the weather is going to be like next week. And while all of this was going on, a town crier appeared. Now, you know what a town crier is. He comes with his drum. The citizens of Goderville, let it be known that there is a pocketbook that has been lost containing 25 pieces of silver belonging to a private citizen. If that pocketbook is returned, a reward will be given. It must be returned to the mayor's office. And with that, the town crier, he picks up his drum and he goes on his way. Well, the topic of conversation changes, of course, and people are talking about, well, who could have found the pocketbook, and will it be returned, and if it's returned, what will the reward be? Well, while all of this conversation was going on, there appeared at the door, at the entrance of the tavern, an official from the police department who asked some of the people standing in the entranceway, was there a John Holcomb present? Well, everybody knew John Holcomb, and they pointed to the peasant at the back of the tavern who was sitting at a long table with a bunch of farmers discussing the price of cabbage. Well, the official asked the man to come with him, that his presence was indeed needed at the mayor's office. Confused and baffled and a little bit suspicious, he followed the official to the mayor's office. Now, when they got there, the mayor, well, he was a tall, grave, kind of pompous public servant, and he said to John Holcomb, "You were seen picking up the pocketbook in the middle of the road today between 9 and 10, and we want to know where it is." Well, Holcomb could hardly get out the answer. He was stumbling. He said, "Pocketbook? I don't know anything about a pocketbook." "You were seen," said the mayor. "Seen? Seen by who?" "You were seen by Jordan the harness maker." Ah, now he understood the misunderstanding. And he said, "Mr. Mayor, I did not pick up the pocketbook in the middle of the road. I picked up this piece of string," and he pulled it out of his pocket. And the mayor looked at him and he said, "Would you have me believe that Jordan the harness maker, a man of good standing credit, would mistake that piece of string for a pocketbook?" Well, it went back and forth until eventually Jordan the harness maker, he showed up. And when those two adversaries got together, well, they insulted and abused each other for almost an hour before eventually Holcomb insisted on being searched. And so he was. And the pocketbook was not found. Well, the mayor, perplexed, he sent Holcomb away with the advice that the prosecutor's office would be contacted. Well, when Holcomb stepped out of the mayor's office, there was a small crowd that had gathered. They had heard about the story of the piece of string, but they wanted to hear it from the source himself, and he was only too glad to repeat the story. And he told them, and he was greeted with laughter and disbelief. Holcomb couldn't believe it himself. Could it be that his craftiness was so well known that nobody would believe him even if he was telling the truth? Well, he started to make his way to the tavern, all along the way, again and again, bringing up the story of the string, even at one time turning out the pockets of his pants to show his innocence. When he finally made it to the tavern, he went from table to table, explaining and talking about his adventures, but all to unsympathetic ears. Oh, the injustice, he thought. First, I'm accused of something I did not do, and now I'm thought of as a liar. Well, finally, when he made it back to his home and fell into bed that evening, he was almost sick with exhaustion. Well, the very next morning, word came to his village, the district where he lived, that the pocketbook had been found and turned in, and the whole affair was over. Well, Holcomb felt vindicated, and he took the very next opportunity to go in the town for the sole purpose of telling his story. And he did, to anybody that would listen. He even told it to a lot of people who didn't want to listen. At one point, he had cornered an old horse trader, and he was telling him the story. Now, this story, by this time, had become so elaborate and so complicated, and his defenses so artful. The old horse trader said, "Oh, go on, you old codger. We know about your piece of string." And Holcomb said, "But the pocketbook had been turned in. It wasn't me." And the old horse dealer said, "Somebody turned that in. We know that, but you're tangled up in it somehow." And Holcomb understood, because his craftiness was so well known, because he was cunning by nature, that people could not believe him, even when he spoke the truth. Well, time goes on, weeks go on, he tells the story again and again, and nobody seems to believe him. And it happened that he was beginning to make himself sick, so sick that by the end of the year, he found himself in bed, unable to get out, and eventually he passed away there. And it is said, on his deathbed, in his delirium, he was saying, "Mr. Mayor, it's only a piece of string. It's only a piece of string."